everyone. This is the orientation video for anyone new to standardized patient work. I'm going to go over a couple things that will help you better understand what we're asking you to do. So first, some of the terminology that we throw around. SP, that's what we call you. You're a standardized patient. And what that means is you're portraying the role of a patient, but you have a standardized or scripted problem. We are going to tell you how we want you to behave and what your illness is, what your issue is. So we call you SPs. And the type of exam that you're working on is called an OSCE, and that stands for Objective Standardized Clinical Exam. Objective means that it's being observed by someone else that's marking the exam, not you. Standardized, again, is where you come in, that everyone's behaving the exact same way for each interaction. Clinical exam is the setting that it's in. So we're in a room like this. It's a clinical setting. It's not a written exam. It's not an oral exam. It's a clinical setting. And we do these exams for a variety of different groups. So you might be working with me. You might be working with other clinical trainers, either for UVic. UVic operates the Island Medical Program, and they use OSCEs. Or the UVic Nurse Practitioner Program. They also use OSCEs, and these are training for their educational programs. Or the Medical Council of Canada uses OSCEs as a physician's licensing exam. So you might be working for different organizations, but the format is always the same. So everything I say in this video applies to whoever you might be working for. The next thing to talk about is just how the OSCE works, how the whole thing fits together. So this is a bird's eye view of the way that we set up the stations. So for example, there's rooms like this, the one I'm standing in right now, and there's a whole bunch of these rooms in a row. So room number 1, room number 2, room number 3, room number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And what we do is we put one standardized patient or scripted patient, so one actor, in a room, and one examiner in the room. So the examiner is going to be a licensed physician, a licensed nurse practitioner, someone who's qualified to mark the station. So the patient's job is not about marking the station. Your job is about portraying the role we've taught you to portray. The examiner's job is to mark the station. So in one room, there's one actor and one examiner, and they're working on one case or scenario. In the next room, different actor, different examiner, completely different case. In the next room, different case. So there's 8 cases, for example, in this track. And then on the door of each room, there's instructions that are relevant to this patient. So the door instructions might say, inside this room, you're meeting Jeff Johnson. He's had a headache for 2 weeks. In the next 5 minutes, take a brief history. Something like that. So it tells them what to do when they come in the room. And so there's different instructions on each door, depending on the case in that room. And then we put, the C's represent candidates or students. These are the people taking the OSCE. So there's a candidate outside each room, an actor inside each room, and an examiner inside each room. And when the signal goes, it'll say, candidates begin reading. The candidates have 2 minutes in the hallway to read the door instructions. When that 2 minutes is up, there'll be an overhead announcement that says, candidates, please enter the room. The candidates will knock and come in the room, and then your station, your simulation begins. The candidates have between 5 and 15 minutes, depending on your station, in the room to interact with you. And then when that time is finished, there'll be another announcement that says, candidates, please exit the room. So you're not in charge of worrying about timing or anything like that. You're not in charge of marking. The SP's job is to portray the patient, and then you get a short break while they're reading in the hallway. So what's going to happen, for example, is all the candidates go in the rooms. It's a 10-minute interaction. When the 10 minutes are over, they'll say, candidates, please exit the room and move to the next station. So the candidate in room number 1 is going to say, thank you very much to this SP. They're going to leave, and they're going to move to the doorway of room number 2, and they're going to start their 2 minutes of reading. The candidate who is here is going to move to this room, the candidate who is here, and so on. So it's a big ongoing track. The SPs and the examiners stay where they are, and the candidates move through the track, seeing patient after patient after patient. And then because we're often trying to get through so many candidates at a time, we'll actually run double tracks. So this is track A with 8 stations, 8 different cases, 8 different actors. Then we'd have track B with the same 8 cases, but a different actor. So this SP in room 1 is portraying the same case as this SP in room 1 over there. And that's where the standardized nature of the work comes in. Part of our training is making sure that this actor is portraying the same level of illness, sadness, pain, discomfort, whatever, as this actor, because they're portraying the same case. So we want the candidates to have the same experience when they're interacting with that patient. So that's just a bit of an overview of how we lay out the stations and how people are moving through the stations. So even though you might be portraying a role for a UVic program or a licensing program, your schedule will vary, but generally it follows the same loose guidelines. So on exam day, we would have everyone arrive at a certain time, for example, 7 a.m. We'll all have breakfast together, we would do an orientation so everybody knows what's going to happen that day. And then we do what's called a dry run, and that's where we put all the actors into the track, into those stations I was talking about before, and then we also have the examiners there, and the examiner pretends to be the candidate. So it's a chance for the examiner to see the station, for the actor to get warmed up, for everybody just to get on the same page about what's happening. So there's almost always a dry run on the exam day, and that's a chance for us all to get on the same page. Then the exam begins. And so if it's a full day exam, the SP or the actor will portray their station, their case, for let's say a 2-hour window. And then we have a break, coffee, snacks, that sort of thing. Then we all get back in the stations for another 2-hour window of portrayal. Then we have a longer break for lunch, and then we'll do one more round, and then the exam is over. Some exams are only half a day, so you'll do this once, maybe twice, and we stop at lunch. It varies. But it's pretty standard that we have breakfast and an orientation and then a dry run with the examiners before we begin the exam day. So the last two things that I want to talk about briefly are confidentiality and some basic guidelines for simulation. So first of all, on the topic of confidentiality, regardless of who the exam is for, whether it's for UVic students, whether it's for licensing, it is highly confidential material. So sometimes we can email you the case, but we ask that you don't share it with anyone, that you destroy any paper copies that you have. For other work, we can't even email you the case. You have to come in and pick it up here at Island Medical and sign it out and return it. So we do that because we reuse these cases again and again. So it's very, very important that the case material never gets shared. You can't talk about it on Facebook that you're playing a certain character in this exam this weekend. You can't practice with a friend and share the exam details with them. You practice with your trainer and you keep the exam information to yourself. When you take on the role of an SP, you'll always be asked to sign a confidentiality form, and that form is binding. So for the life of the program, we ask that you keep the confidentiality. So it's not as though once the exam is finished, now you can talk about the case. You can never talk about it. So you have this really great acting gig that you can't ever tell anyone what you do or what happens. So it's tricky. So that's the confidentiality, and it's really, really important to stress how big of a deal that is. Exam security is very important. If you're asked to pick a case up here at Island Medical, if you have to actually sign out a folder, take that folder directly home and put it somewhere safe. Don't take it out with you to study at school. You might leave it on the bus, you might leave it on a bench, and the repercussions for losing a case are quite high. It will change the exam all across Canada. So I can't stress enough how important it is to not talk about the exam except with your trainer and to never ever share or lose exam content. That being said, the other topic are some basic rules of simulation. Again, regardless of who you're doing the exam for, the general guidelines are always the same. They are one question gets one answer. And what that means is we're marking the candidates based on what they ask you, the actor or the patient. So if they ask you a question and you give them a whole bunch of information that wasn't entirely what they asked for, they're not going to ask you the follow-up questions that they would get marked to ask. So for example, let's say your name is Jeff Johnson, you've had this headache for a couple of weeks, you're also a smoker, and you are divorced. And so the candidate comes in and says, so tell me about your headache. The correct answer for you is to say, yeah, I've had it for about 2 weeks, or it's very painful. One bit of information about the headache. What we don't want you to do is say, I've had this headache for 2 weeks and I've been a smoker for 20 years and you know what, I'm also divorced. Because that's too much information, and the candidate now doesn't have to ask you if you're divorced. They don't have to ask you if you're a smoker, and they would be getting points for asking those questions. So we always have to ask our actors to curb their desire to be helpful, because when we think we're helping by giving more information, we're not actually helping them. We're causing them to lose marks because we're giving them too much information. So a general guideline is that one question gets them, that'll elicit from you one little bit of information. They have to ask you the next follow-up question to get more information. So are you a smoker? Yes. How long have you smoked for? 20 years. How much do you smoke a day? A pack and a half. That's the sort of general back and forth that we would be looking for from the candidates. Second guideline is that all of the cases that we do always have an opening line. It's your chief complaint. It's what the actor says to start the station. It could be, I've had this headache for 2 weeks. It could be, I'm feeling tired all the time and I just can't concentrate. There's a variety of different opening lines, but the main guideline or rule is that you have to say your opening line exactly how it's written every single time, so that every candidate who walks in the room gets the same starting point. They all have a patient who says, I've had this headache for 2 weeks. And then it's up to them. However the station goes, it's up to the candidate to take the lead. As long as our actors, as long as we have given our opening line exactly how it's written, the same way every time, now the onus is on the candidate to carry the simulation forward, and we just respond to them. So making sure that we're reticent with information and making sure that we follow the script wherever we're asked to are two guiding principles of simulation. And the rest of the details we work out in our trainings together. The goal of a clinical trainer is to make sure that you, the actor, feel completely confident and comfortable in your role and you're not uncertain about what is required of you. That concludes my brief informal orientation video. I just want to thank you for watching up to this point, and I also wanted to take a minute to thank you for either being willing to try being an SP or coming back year after year to be an SP. You are crucial to our education programs and our licensing programs in Canada. We are committed to improving healthcare through nursing training, nurse practitioner training, and medical student training, and we couldn't do it without committed, standardized patients who understand the work and understand their role in improving healthcare. You're very important to this role, and we thank you for signing up. I'll see you at your training.